everyone, to the Next Best Picture podcast, where we are talking with Magnus Van Horn, the director and co-writer of The Girl with the Needle. Magnus, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me.
Very excited to talk with you about this film, one of the most striking and the most depressing, but in a good way, films of the year. This is the first of your films, even going back to your shorts, where you have a credited co-writer. And I was curious what led you to Line Langebæk Knudsen as your collaborator for this film.
Well, actually, Line and Malene Blenkov, who is the Danish producer on the film, approached me maybe 5 years ago or something like this, when they had the idea, or Line had the original idea, to make something inspired by or based on Dagmar Øverby, these true crimes that took place in Denmark 100 years ago, or even a bit more. And I had worked with Malene, the producer, a bit before, and I told her I wanted to make a horror film, and she felt that maybe this would be material for me. And I really felt that it was, because I wanted to make a horror that was not, your typical genre horror, like but a character-based story, but that flirts with the horror genres. And I thought this was really material for that. I have two kids of my own. One was just born at the time when I was approached with this idea, and it also touches on this kind of extreme fear of a father or of a parent, having something happen to their kid. So carrying a newborn a lot at the same time as thinking about this idea, it like touches on a extreme fear. And I like to use fear as a kind of a creative fuel to make, to tell stories. I've done it before, and it helps me. It makes it personal. I feel engaged at moments like that, and it's a way I know that I can work as well. So it felt very kind of accurate. And then, of course, the story grew a lot in many different directions, because at first it just looks like, these horrendous crimes, but then you start seeing the society surrounding those crimes. And what does that say about the human condition at the time, and what choices women had? And suddenly after that, you start seeing that also connects to today's society and to a contemporary world. And then it's like really starts blowing your mind and becomes very inspiring, because it becomes urgent in a different way suddenly. And you start, like science fiction, you start seeing your contemporary world in this kind of time travel, where your story is set not in the, not here and now, but in the past in this case, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's the parallels between the things that you're showing and contemporary society they're impossible to miss, unfortunately, given the state of the world. I'm curious, how did the collaboration with Line on the screenplay work?
I think, we started discussing who should be the main character of this story, because I think we both felt we didn't want to make a biopic about a serial killer. We wanted a main character that was, someone we could relate to and go on a journey with, where we would feel a bit similar to this person, have an emotional connection. And also, it was important, we didn't want to focus on exactly the historical correct version of this story. We wanted to tell our own story, inspired by those events. That's also something that was, really important. It's an important decision, because when you read about the true story, and suddenly you come across things that don't fit into your imagination, it's very nice to have chosen the position that I pick, what fits our story, and not what was historically exactly correct, or what happened, or not, not to care too much about the facts. That's an interesting process. Also, I would say it took maybe 4 years to write this script, which is also
Wow.
connected to the long take. It's not only because we need 4 years, I would say, maybe that's the half truth, but it's also, you know, financing this kind of film in Europe with this kind of theme, and it's difficult. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a project people just throw money at. So it's a financing process that takes time, and that also allows for writing. So I mean, Line wrote for the first 2 years, then I wrote for the second 2 years. That's when, you know, actresses starts getting attached. The main actress, Vic Carmen Sonne, got attached, and then, you know, I started looking at locations, and I need to write everything according to what I know I have in production or surrounding the film. I see it, you know, coming together. I need to write the script that is attached to that. That's part of, you know, writing, and it becomes directing. To some extent,
Hmm.
it becomes the beginning of rehearsals with the actresses. It's, you know, removing the script completely just from having it in our heads where everything is possible to writing a script that is also possible to make.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad that you brought up the cast because both Vivek Carmensona and Trine Dyrholm are so fantastic in this film, so memorable just in their faces. But I'm curious what you were looking for in the people who were going to play these characters that led you to cast these two.
I mean, especially for Carolina, who is played by Vic Carmensona, the main character. For me, it was, but that's also to connect it to our ambitions of, you know, wanting to make a film that feels like it's taking place, that we really believe we're in a different time of the world,
Mm,
that we have done a time travel. Our ambitions were super high to create this world and to have the audience feel it, you know, smell it. And that also says in I mean, through that lens, I wanted to find an actress that would really feel credible in this world.
mm,
And most young actresses that I was meeting and casting in Denmark felt too healthy, and you know, they come from you know, a country with a great welfare, and it says something very good about Denmark. But Vic has this, you know, amazing beauty that also makes me believe without costume and makeup, I can see, okay, she fits into this factory and to this world. I would believe that. But it's not only about, you know, the outside. On the inside, she also has this emotional range that to me felt very kind of fresh and could be part of a different world. It's unexpected, and her
mm.
facial reactions and the kind of her behavior could also work in that world, and I felt that was very interesting. um, and that was what was most important for me in like casting that part. And Trine was someone who I always wanted to work with, and the first time I approached her with this script, she said no, because I mean, she felt the story was interesting, but the script was not ready.
Mm.
Uh, that was also a very good, but you know, I had a lunch with her and she was playing with a toothpick while turning me down in a way that I felt was, you know, she was teasing me like, I can do this if you write a good
Mm.
script enough, you know. And she was just giving me a hint of Dagmar with a toothpick. Now
Yeah.
she will say that that was just accidental, but I don't believe that. My version of the story, she knew exactly what she was doing, and she sent me away without urgency. You know, to I have to get her. So we continued to work on the script, and eventually she also felt that it was good enough. And I mean, Vic is a
Mm.
friend of Trine; they know each other. Vic also helped push, you know, from her side, and eventually she's, I believe, the only one who can play Dagmar Överby. She's fearless as an actress, and I think that's you know, how do you make a portrait of a serial killer that is not too sentimental or making this person into a victim, but at the same time not only demonizing and making it into a devil. It's like the balance between that is extremely is subtle and difficult to catch, but she's able to do that. I gave her three references to that character that I thought about, which was Reagan from The Exorcist, as the devil speaks through her, Willem Dafoe in The Lighthouse, and Fagin from Oliver Twist in the David Lean version from 1948. And she just got that. I showed her like 3 YouTube clips, and she was like, okay. And
Wow.
she really, it's wonderful to work with someone who has that kind of experience and stability, that they will understand what that means, and that doesn't, and to look at, to use these references, but always work in a way to defend the character they're portraying without being sentimental about it. Yeah, she's great.
She is. Both of them are absolutely fantastic in the film. You had said something when you were talking about casting Vic, that you wanted the audience to feel it, everything around in this world. You want it to feel very real and present for them. So I'm curious, what led you to the decision to shoot the film in black and white, and was that part of that vision, that idea?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, because it's me and cinematographer Michał Dymek. We spoke a lot about, okay, how do we make this world credible? And there's so many costume dramas or period pieces, where we just look at some actor got a fake mustache and a hat and a coat, and suddenly we're supposed to believe we're in a different time. There's this contract with the audience that we don't need to believe in the world, but we just pretend that it's set in the back in the days or whenever. But our references were very much, films that managed to take the audience on a time travel, and we wanted to touch on that. We wanted to connect to such films like Schindler's List, for example. It's one film that successfully is able to make that world it's portraying credible. And we were speaking, okay, so how can we best do that with the means we have? And it was like what the result we came to was, or the solution is to to connect to the images that represent the times our story is set in. Those images are films and photography, and they're all black and white. They all have a certain aesthetics that have been, established by the people who made those films and who took those photographs. And they are not necessarily the truth of what the world looked like, but they are a representation of that truth that we as people today collectively kind of own, and that for us represent those times. So we wanted to use all those artistic choices and to tap into those images and be inspired by those. And that's, German expressionism from the film side, or the photography, the format of the photography from that time, the black and white images. And often it's also images that are not necessarily, not at all from Copenhagen in the 1910s, but let's say the industrialism in England, or film noir that is much later, which, connected they create this kind of black and white images that we felt for us would make a credible image of that world we wanted to create. So that was the kind of solution. I don't know if it sounds complicated or not, but the real world never really interested us. The facts of history didn't interest us. The facts of history of these true crimes are only interesting to a certain extent, but we are not telling a story based on facts. We have our own story we need to answer to.
Yeah, and there's something about that black and white, especially how you use with such beautiful contrast between them, that it feels very emotionally true, a lot of these images, because of that starkness between the black and white. It looks incredible.
But it's important also, one element that is very concrete, and what we always said, we need mud, water, and smoke.
Mm.
And and we wanted to use as much of that, I mean, in good taste as possible to create this. Those three elements like were crucial for us shooting exteriors, for example. And also we thought about the story a bit as a fairy tale, which gave us the guts to exaggerate things and not to think about it as what is realistic and what is not, only about what looks good. We could, where poverty was supposed to exist, we could make it, really, really poor without fearing that we're exaggerating and instead believing that we're creating an interesting world. So the fairy tale element of that was really helpful. But also, there was a lot of fun and freedom in creating the city they're in. We're building miniatures that we were shooting as well to also tap into working methods used, back in the day, some more analog solutions to effects and such things. And it opens up a creative way of working, and it's just fun creating this world as well.
It's really great to hear. I know we're coming up on the end of our allotted time, but I had to ask before we go because this movie has one of the most striking openings that I've seen in quite some time, with these faces layered on top of each other and blending into each other. And you were just talking about how you saw this as a fairy tale, and now I'm thinking about that in that context as like this magic trick or people shape shifting into these things. I'm just curious where this idea for that opening image came from.
Well, it's that these characters that first of all, it sets the tone of a film. It's a promise that something will come. What kind of film, it sets the tone. But also that these characters, when we watch the opening of the film, we don't yet know these characters, but it's basically they exist within each other. However, they will never be able to be separate. They become part of each other, and that's about the good and the bad, right? We can't separate ourselves from one and just be good or just be bad. We float into one another, and the film is about that. And it's also, I mean, I always thought about the story, or at one moment even called it The Many Faces of Carolina, because she goes through all these different places. She's on a journey. She meets different people. She changes. She's poor factory worker. She almost becomes a rich lady. She becomes, then even worse, more poor than she was in the beginning. She ends up being, working in a candy store, helping to run an adoption agency. And, she becomes later a drug addict. And she has all these different faces. Faces with different, real faces. She goes through, and that was also tapping into that.
Fantastic. It's really fascinating to talk to you. I feel like I could talk to you about this film for much longer than we have, but unfortunately that's all the time we have for today. But again, thank you so much for talking with us today, and thank you so much for this incredible film.
Thank you so much, and thank you for loving the film and for wanting to talk about it, and it's a pleasure.
Oh, the pleasure's all mine.